Welcome to Pastopia, where we uncover the stories that shaped our world. Picture this, an empire so vast it spanned 3 continents, its legions marching through deserts, forests, and mountains, building roads, aqueducts, and cities that still awe us today. That's the Roman Empire at its peak, a juggernaut of power, culture, and ambition. But even Rome, the eternal conqueror, had its limits. There were lands and peoples it could never fully subdue, no matter how many legions it sent or how grand its plans. From the dark forests of Germania to the windswept hills of Caledonia and the scorching deserts of Parthia, these regions stood defiant, resisting Rome's iron grip. Why couldn't the mightiest empire in history conquer these lands? What made them so untouchable? Let's embark on a journey through the earth that Rome could never conquer and find out what stopped the unstoppable. To understand this story, we need to grasp the scale of Rome's ambition. By the 1st century AD, the Roman Empire stretched from the Atlantic shores of Hispania to the sands of Egypt, encompassing over 5 million square kilometers. It was a machine of conquest, driven by disciplined legions, brilliant engineers, and a knack for assimilating conquered peoples into its culture. Rome didn't just conquer, it Romanized, building bathhouses, theaters, and temples, offering citizenship to elites and spreading Latin and law. But not every land or people bent to this machine. Some resisted with ferocity, cunning, or sheer geography, exposing the limits of even Rome's power. Let's start our journey in Germania, the wild frontier east of the Rhine River, roughly modern-day Germany and parts of Scandinavia. Germania was a land of dense forests, muddy swamps, and scattered tribes like the Charisse, Chatti, and Suebi. Unlike Gaul, which Rome had subdued by the 50s BC under Julius Caesar, Germania was not a single kingdom but a patchwork of fiercely independent tribes. These tribes shared a warrior culture, valuing freedom and loyalty to their kin over any centralized rule. Rome first eyed Germania in the late 1st century BC, under Emperor Augustus, who dreamed of pushing the empire's borders beyond the Rhine to the Elbe River. He sent his legions in, expecting to replicate the success of Gaul. After all, Rome had conquered sophisticated civilizations like Carthage and Greece. How hard could a bunch of barbarians be? The answer came in 9 AD, at the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, one of Rome's greatest defeats. Roman General Publius Quinctilius Varus, a trusted commander, led 3 legions, about 15,000 men, into Germania to impose Roman rule. Varus was confident, perhaps too confident, trusting a Germanic chieftain named Arminius from the Charussi tribe. Arminius had trained with the Romans, spoke Latin, and seemed loyal, but he was playing a double game. Secretly, he united several tribes and planned a trap. He lured Varus's legions into the Teutoburg Forest, a dense, swampy maze where Roman formations couldn't maneuver. Over 3 days, Arminius's warriors ambushed the Romans, striking from the trees, using the terrain to their advantage. The legions, weighed down by heavy armor and baggage, were slaughtered. Varus took his own life, and the survivors fled in disgrace. When news reached Rome, Augustus reportedly wandered his palace, banging his head and crying, "Varus, give me back my legions!" This disaster halted Rome's ambitions in Germania. The Rhine became the empire's eastern frontier, fortified with watchtowers and camps. Later emperors, like Tiberius and Germanicus, launched punitive campaigns, winning battles and recovering the lost legionary eagles, but they never established lasting control. Why? Germania's geography was a nightmare for Rome. The forests and bogs neutralized the legion's strengths, tight formations, and siege tactics. The tribes fought as guerrillas, striking and vanishing. They had no central capital to capture, no king to defeat. Each tribe had to be subdued individually, a draining task. Plus, Germania offered little economic reward. No rich cities or fertile plains, just endless forests and hostile warriors. Rome decided it wasn't worth the cost, and the Rhine remained its boundary. Now, let's travel north to Caledonia, modern-day Scotland, another land Rome couldn't tame. By the 1st century AD, Rome had conquered most of Britain, turning it into the province of Britannia. Cities like Londinium sprang up, and Roman roads crisscrossed the south. But beyond the River Forth, in the rugged highlands of Caledonia, lived the Picts, a collection of tribes known for their fierce independence and later their painted bodies. In 79 AD, Roman governor Gnaeus Julius Agricola marched north to subdue them. He built forts, scouted the terrain, and in 83 AD won a major victory at the Battle of Mons Graupius, defeating a Pictish army of perhaps 30,000. Agricola's legions routed the Picts in open battle, showcasing Rome's military might. But victory didn't mean conquest. The Picts refused to play by Rome's rules. After Mons Graupius, they avoided pitched battles, retreating into the highlands where Roman legions struggled. Caledonia's landscape was brutal. Jagged mountains, dense forests, and freezing winters. Supply lines stretched thin, and Roman soldiers, trained for Mediterranean climates, shivered in their sandals. The Picts used guerrilla tactics, ambushing patrols and raiding forts. Agricola's successors realized holding Caledonia was a losing game. By 122 AD, Emperor Hadrian ordered the construction of Hadrian's Wall, a 73-mile stone barrier across northern Britain to keep the Picts out. Later, Emperor Antoninus Pius tried again, building the Antonine Wall further north in the 140s AD, but it was abandoned within 20 years. The Picts' mobility, knowledge of the terrain, and refusal to centralize made them impossible to subdue. Caledonia remained a thorn in Rome's side, its people free beyond the walls. Now, let's shift to the east, where Rome faced a very different foe. The Parthian Empire, centered in modern-day Iran and Iraq. Unlike the tribal societies of Germania and Caledonia, Parthia was a sophisticated empire, rivaling Rome in wealth and organization. It controlled the Silk Road, profiting from trade between China and the Mediterranean. Parthia's strength lay in its cavalry. Light horse archers who could shoot while retreating, and heavy cataphracts, armored knights who charged with lances. Rome and Parthia clashed over Mesopotamia, a fertile region both coveted. The first major clash came in 53 BC at the Battle of Carrhae, a humiliating Roman defeat. Roman general Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of Rome's richest men, invaded Parthia with 40,000 men. The Parthians, led by General Surina, had only 10,000, mostly horse archers. On the open plains of Carrhae, the Parthians outmaneuvered the Romans, showering them with arrows. Crassus's legions couldn't close the distance. Over 20,000 Romans died. Crassus was killed, and several legionary eagle standards were captured, a disgrace Rome never forgot. Over the centuries, Rome tried again. Emperor Trajan, in the early 2nd century AD, launched a massive campaign, capturing Parthia's capital, Ctesiphon, and briefly holding Mesopotamia. But Parthia struck back. The desert stretched Roman supply lines, and Parthian cavalry harassed garrisons. Trajan's successor, Hadrian, gave up most of the gains, pulling back to defensible borders. By the 3rd century, Parthia was replaced by the even stronger Sassanid Empire, which continued to challenge Rome. The east remained a constant drain, with Rome winning battles but never securing lasting control. Parthia's mobility, vast territory, and economic power made it a rival Rome couldn't crush. So, why did these lands, Germania, Caledonia, and Parthia, resist Rome's conquest? Let's break it down. First, geography was a massive obstacle. Germania's forests and swamps, Caledonia's mountains and bogs, and Parthia's deserts were hostile to Roman tactics. The legions excelled in open battles and sieges, relying on roads and supply chains. These regions offered none of that. In Germania, trees blocked formations. In Caledonia, mountains had enemies. In Parthia, deserts exhausted armies. The locals knew their terrain and used it masterfully, turning Rome's strengths into weaknesses. Second, the people themselves were formidable. The Germanic tribes fought as decentralized warriors, loyal to their chiefs, not a king Rome could topple. The Picts were similar, melting into the highlands after every skirmish. Parthia, meanwhile, had a professional army and a centralized state, matching Rome's organization. These groups didn't just fight, they adapted. Arminius used Roman training against Rome. The Picts avoided battles they couldn't win. Parthian archers exploited Rome's lack of cavalry. Each group played to its strengths, countering Rome's playbook. Third, economics played a huge role. Conquering and holding territory wasn't cheap. Rome's empire ran on taxes, tribute, and plunder, but Germania and Caledonia offered little reward. Their lands were poor in resources compared to, say, Egypt's grain or Hispania's silver. Parthia was richer, but the cost of campaigning across deserts, maintaining garrisons, and fighting a rival empire was astronomical. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Rome faced economic woes, hyperinflation, debased currency, and over-reliance on slave labor. Every denarius spent on far-flung wars was a denarius not spent on Rome's crumbling infrastructure or restless borders. Fourth, political instability hurt Rome's efforts. The empire's early centuries saw relative stability, but by the 3rd century, the crisis of the 3rd century brought chaos. Emperors were assassinated or overthrown at a dizzying rate. Over 20 and 50 years, civil wars drained resources, and generals prioritized personal power over distant campaigns. In Germania, Rome couldn't sustain long-term conquests without stable leadership. In Caledonia, walls were built to avoid the problem altogether. In Parthia, Rome's eastern wars became a cycle of advance and retreat as new emperors shifted priorities. Finally, there was a human spirit. The people of Germania, Caledonia, and Parthia weren't just fighting for land. They were fighting for identity. The Germanic tribes cherished their independence, living by their own laws and gods. The Picts saw themselves as guardians of their rugged homeland, resisting Roman luxuries like bathhouses or citizenship. The Parthians took pride in their empire, viewing Rome as an arrogant upstart. Rome's genius was assimilation, turning Gauls and Iberians into Romans. But these groups refused to be Romanized. Their resistance was cultural as much as military, rooted in a refusal to bow. As Rome aged, these unconquered lands exposed its vulnerabilities. By the 4th century, the empire was overstretched, its economy faltering, its borders under pressure. Germanic tribes crossed the Rhine, sacking cities and settling within the empire. The Picts raided south, breaching Hadrian's Wall. In the east, the Sassanids kept Rome on the defensive. The Western Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, when the last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by a Germanic chieftain, Odoacer. The Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, survived, but the West collapsed under the weight of its ambitions. The earth Rome couldn't conquer didn't just resist, it outlasted. The story of these lands reminds us that even the mightiest empires have limits. Geography, culture, economics, and human will can defy even the strongest armies. Germania's forests, Caledonia's hills, and Parthia's deserts weren't just battlegrounds. They were symbols of resistance, proving that no empire, no matter how grand, can conquer everything. Thanks for joining me on this epic journey through history with Pastopia. If you loved exploring the lands Rome couldn't conquer, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for more stories from the past. Drop a comment below. Tell me which of these defiant regions fascinated you most, or what historical topic you want us to tackle next. Until then, keep diving into history with Pastopia, and I'll see you in the next video.